All right, greetings, folks. Welcome to week number 10. That is right, week number 10 of your 9407 class, which is your intellectual freedom class. As always, I'm your professor, Dr. Chase K. Austin, and what we are going to do today is a quick state of the course update. And then after that state of the course update, what we are going to do is what I will kind of brand a tale of two issues with library meeting space, okay? And this is going to be controversial, which I have said controversial stuff in this in this class already. So we've set that tone. This is an intellectual freedom class, so I probably should be controversial in such a class. Otherwise, I think it's just boring. But with that said, I also do want to note that this is probably as controversial as I get. So for those of you who are a little unnerved by how I operate in this class, please just know that I am toned down a lot more in classes like the business reference class, which I hope some of you will take in the spring, as well as the regular reference class, which most of you have already taken, and the academic libraries class and the cultural heritage course. Those are the courses that I teach on a regular basis. And yes, in those classes, I'm a bit more mild-mannered, but in this class, again, you have to kind of go for the gusto. I'm sorry. The main thing is I want you all to feel intellectually free, so I have to be intellectually free so that you all will see that that is the tone of the class, and then you will respond accordingly. At least that's what I hope. That's why I do how I do. Okay, let's go ahead and get into that state of the course update, shall we? All right, so first let's get into the state of the course update and what you have coming up in the rest of the class. So the main thing that I want you all to know, and again, I've admitted before that this was a boo-boo on my part, but we're going to go ahead and see how things go anyway, even though I made this mistake. So I could have requested a later meeting date in November, which is what I usually do, and in fact, I requested it for the wrong class, if I'm being honest with you. So our debate, which usually takes place in late November, is actually going to take place the first week of November, November the 5th. And that is, oh goodness, that's also election day, isn't it? Okay, so yeah, I also schedule our debate on election day. I am going to ask our debaters if they can to vote early if possible, and that way you aren't stressed out about the debate when you go vote, okay? So there's that. But yes, we're going to have our debate on hate speech on November the 5th, okay? So I do want you all, well, you're required to be at the sync sessions anyway, and if you don't attend them, you do lose points. But yes, you all should be there to support your classmates. We're going to have a great debate. It's going to occur a little earlier this semester, so this gives me an opportunity to see, okay, should I actually start scheduling the debate a little earlier so that the debaters can then kind of refocus and not have preparation for the debate on top of everything else they're doing at the end of the semester. So I'm going to talk to our 8 debaters after the debate and see how they are doing. So that is one of the state of the course updates. The debaters, you're going to have a huge monkey off your back once you do the debate, because remember, you don't have to do the final paper. So after November 5th, all you have to do is readings and discussion board posts. So you can cruise after the debate, but you got to get through the debate first, which I hope you all will have fun and enjoy it. But again, after the debate, you just go ahead and do discussion boards for the rest of your time in the course, and you just take it easy. You deserve it because you earned it by doing all this debate prep. And in fact, I just lied. I'm sorry, debaters. No, you don't. After the sync session for the debate, you don't just have discussion board prompts. I forgot, because usually, again, the letter, your advocacy assignment usually comes before the debate. So I apologize. Yes, even after the debate, debaters, you are going to have to do your advocacy letter assignment. So I apologize for that. You are not exempt from this. You are exempt from the final assignment. I repeat, debaters, you are not exempt from the advocacy letter. You're exempted from the final paper. So you still have to do the advocacy letter, which will probably take less time anyway. I think the advocacy letter is like, at most, probably like maybe a 3 to 4 hour assignment. It probably isn't going to take you that long to do this, honestly, okay? But yeah, you are going to have to do that. And for everyone to know, this will be, again, after the debate. The debate is on November the 5th, election day, and then November the 17th is when you are going to have your advocacy letter assignment due. Now, after the advocacy letter assignment, debaters, that is when you'll just have discussion board posts, okay? But everybody else will have a final paper to do. And again, the advocacy letter is not, it's if you can write a letter, then you're going to be fine. Okay, but yeah, look at the prompt, and if you have any questions, ask me, okay? And then everything else is just discussion board prompts and your final paper. And if you have any questions about whether or not your topic for your final paper is appropriate, again, just reach out to me and I will let you know. But most, well, I wouldn't say most topics are going to be appropriate, but anything that kind of deals with what we've been talking about in this class is probably going to be appropriate. And then even if it's not something that we've been talking about in the class, if it is something that deals with some form of intellectual freedom issue, I am more than happy to hear out your arguments for why you should be able to why you should be able to write about that thing. And if what you say is well, if it goes, it goes. if you come up with a intellectual freedom paper topic that you really that isn't really something that we've talked about in the class, but you want to run it by me, if it's something that still deals with intellectual freedom, I'm probably going to say yes. You just need to make the case. You need to make the case, but you can contact me, and that is how you make the case. Okay, that is it for this the course update. Now let's talk about a tale of two different library space issues and what I'm going to say about it. A lot of you aren't going to like this, but this is what I'm going to say. Balls. All right, so this is going to be controversial, and quite frankly, it could even get me in trouble at my job or something like that. But I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway because I feel this is something that needs to be said. And I feel that when it comes to the library field has its winners and losers as far as, well, let me put it this way. So the library field does a whole lot of righteous indignation, I'll just term it, okay? But righteous indignation can be a good thing. For those of you who are Christians, Jesus had an example of righteous indignation in the Bible when he flipped over the tables. So it is not always a bad thing. We recognize that story from the Christian Bible as a good thing. And there are other examples of good righteous indignation. However, when it comes to the library field, librarians do a whole lot of supposed advocacy for people who are traditionally disenfranchised. And really that does go by the nature of the field, because the field is about giving people equal access to information, right? So it's about reducing the barriers to information and allowing everybody to have hopefully equal access. And so that means that no matter what your income and all those things are, you should still be able to access information. And if you aren't able to access information, the library is going to help you do that. So given that that is the nature of librarianship, yes, of course, you're going to end up in these situations where you have librarians, you're going to create a situation, I should say, where librarians tend to be people who want to speak up for the traditionally disenfranchised, because we are a field of people who are trying to remedy disenfranchisement of information, right? But having said that, unfortunately, what I see in the library field also, though, is picking of winners and losers. And yes, I am going to say, from my perspective as a black man, I do feel that black people are at the bottom of who this field picks for winners and losers, which is interesting because black people, along with indigenous people, are probably people who have some of the hardest and most hard to hear horror stories that you're going to find within the history of this country, right? But even in spite of that, we tend to, I've seen it, just throughout my observation. I'm plugged into librarianship every single day. And I will say that within librarianship, the concerns of black people take a backseat to the concerns of people who migrate into this country, for one thing. Immigrant services, as of right now, they have taken a huge, and I really, really, really do mean a huge priority within the library field over the plight and the needs of Black Americans. The same can be said of, personally, other people of color. And I'm also going to say is that there is a deprioritization of Black people when it comes to if there's a situation of Black people versus, and I hate to go here, but I have to. The library field appropriately is very in tune to the issues faced by what I call QT, queer, trans. You can also say LGBTQ plus and a host of other things. But I have seen that there is a paradigm shift, and I want this to be clear because I am straight and I'm cisgender. So I want it to be clear that there is a paradigm of QT being accepted. If you don't necessarily want to write out the whole string of letters or put the plus signs there, queer, from what I understand, can encompass pretty much anything that's not hetero. So queer, trans, QT is verbiage that I'm seeing a lot. And there is a paradigm for its usage. Is definitely not universal, okay? And that's something we have to be careful of. But to me, this kind of relates to, okay, do you call black people black or do you call us African American, right? Different people have different preferences, and then people, when they don't get their preference, sometimes they go off and act like, oh, my preference is the way everyone wants it. No, there are people who want the LGBTQ plus. There are people who want the QT, and there are people who want other sorts of things. I'm not going to make anybody. I'm not going to make everybody happy, so I'm not going to attempt to. All right, but we're finally here. I know I spoke a lot, but we're finally here to the point where I can give you a contrast of how an issue was dealt with when it involved the QT community versus how an issue was dealt with when it involved a black person. Let's take a look. So, for those of you who don't know about this situation, and we are talking about meeting spaces this in our module this week. So I'm actually talking about the same thing that the module was talking about, just taking a different spin on it. But so let's say that we are talking about, okay, a space usage issue that occurred up in Seattle a few years ago. So what happened, just to, there's a lot involved in this, and I'm not going to have time in the video, even if the video goes an hour, which I think it does. I'm still not going to have time to talk about all of this. So what I want you all to do is, if you want to find out more, then just start Googling around. You'll find it. Trust me, you'll find it. There's a lot out there. But what you had back in 2019 was the Seattle Public Library, and this is a intellectual freedom issue. Seattle Public Library allowed a group to use its space, and the group was called Women's Liberation Front. And this group is apparently what they call TERF, Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminists. This group does not recognize transgender women. To my understanding, this group does not recognize transgender women as women, only cisgender women. Now, honestly, just to keep it real, I'm not gonna get into that piece of it right now, because I feel I lack perspective on it, just to be honest with you. So don't get me wrong, when it comes to trans men, I recognize trans men as men. And when it comes to, like, to me, that's something that, okay, this is something that as a man, this is something that could potentially be something, I don't want to say relevance, because all of it is relevant. I care about all of the people. But let me pause while I find the right word. Okay, this is the best way that I can say this. And again, this is going to be controversial, but this is how I just have to do this. So I'm going to put it this way. There are different power dynamics in this country when it comes to men and women, right? There are different power dynamics. And a lot of times when you look at the man to woman power dynamic, a lot of times it is the women who are disempowered by the way society operates. And so they do need accommodations and protections and things like that. And so I don't know what it's like to live my life as a woman, right? I was born male and identify as a man and have always identified as a boy until I was grown, and then I identified as a man. So as somebody who doesn't know what it's really like to navigate the society as a woman, all I can do is talk about, I feel all I should be doing is I should be listening to women, and then I should be speaking about what it is with me as a man, honestly. But I try to avoid speaking about the issues that women experience because I don't actually experience them myself, and I don't know what it's like, and I don't know what it's like to operate within this society as a woman. But from a man perspective, what I'm going to say is I feel no threat or discomfort or anything with the existence of transgender men. So if there's a transgender man who is, using a men's space, a quote unquote men's space, or is or a transgender man is playing on a men's sports team or something like that. Basically what I'm trying to say is I don't feel the same power dynamic, right? Like I've actually been in a bathroom where somebody who was more than likely a woman. I'm in the public bathroom washing my hand, and this woman, just like you see on the commercial, there used to be a commercial like this, like a Southwest commercial, where you would see a woman and she came in trying to adjust her contact, and she looked in the mirror and then she realized that she was actually in the men's bathroom. I've actually had that situation happen, the exact same situation. It's just that it wasn't a bunch of men, it was just me and her. But she came in to adjust her contact. And then she looked at me. I'm washing my hands and I'm just kind of looking at her. And then she looks at me and she's like, I'm in the men's bathroom, aren't I? And I was like, yeah, but you're good. And and then she just kind of walks out, and that was the end of it. But there was no feeling of invasiveness or threat to me, right? Because I typically, no, don't get me wrong, anyone can be a bad person. But typically, if I'm being honest, when I look at actual threats, usually threats to my safety are usually men, not women, if I'm being honest. And hopefully that doesn't get me in trouble. Hopefully that won't be controversial, because that's pretty much true. Don't get me wrong, I've been taken advantage of by women before, but really when it comes to threats to my safety, immediate threats perceived in my environment to my safety, usually they're men. Usually it's the men that I have to look out for and not the women. So I don't understand, basically, I haven't lived the power dynamic of, okay, what is it like when you're a woman in a woman's space and you expect there to be other women in the women's space, and when you perceive that somebody is now in the space that is different, I don't know how that makes women feel, just to be honest with you, because I don't have that experience as a woman. I don't have the experience of having to, there are things that women have told me they have to do that I never have to think about. Like, for instance, there was a woman who told me one time that she only got apartments on the second floor because of safety issues of having an apartment on the first floor. I, as a man, don't think about that. So as a man, don't think about these safety issues. So I try to avoid passing judgment on these perceptions of safety issues that come up, because I don't really understand what is going on. And what I will say is, yes, in my opinion, yes, I do view trans women as women. I don't say, oh, these are a different type of woman or anything like that. I just say women are women, cisgender women are women, transgender women are women. But what I don't do is tell anyone other than other cis men, how they should feel about a situation. I don't tell trans people how they should feel about a situation. I don't tell women, whether they're trans or cis, how they should feel about a situation, because it's not in my purview. I should be listening, not telling. But yes, I can talk about, okay, with cis men, I can talk and I can say, well, this is probably what we should be thinking, because, hey, I lived that experience, okay? So getting back, what we have here is a trans exclusionary radical feminist organization, as it's been termed here. Now, another thing that I'm going to just quite frankly say, and again, this may not be popular, but this is where I'm at on it. I also hesitate to identify anybody as a TERF, because I don't feel that I, as a cisgender man, should be calling any type of feminism, quote unquote, radical. It's not my place to determine the value I feel of feminism. It is not my place to determine what feminism is good and what feminism is bad, because the people who are trying their best to benefit from the feminism are people who are not cisgender men, to be quite honest with you. But having said that, and this is going to be, again, something that kind of throws some people a little bit for a loop here. I quite frankly don't know what I would do in this situation, but what happened in this situation was that Women's Liberation, what do they call it again? Women's Liberation Front was allowed to use the meeting space, and they were allowed to have a program there. And in their program, apparently there was indeed some criticism of the trans movement. With that said, this became an issue within all of American librarianship. Like everybody was weighing in on this. I remember when it happened and everybody had an opinion. Nobody was being quiet about this. This was within library discussion realms for days, if not weeks. But for days, if not weeks, we were talking about, okay, this situation, Women's Liberation Front, they come in, they host a program, they make some of the but they make some of the staff at Seattle Public Library feel unsafe due to, due to what they were espousing. And there are trans employees of the Seattle Public Library. They were made to feel unsafe. Patrons who were transgender were also made to feel unsafe, and so forth and so on. And so this became a very big deal. Marcellus Turner, who was the head of Seattle Public Libraries at the time, he really got nailed on this. Also ended up leaving Seattle Public Library. But this was a big thing, and it became an intellectual freedom issue of, okay, do they have, first of all, is what they're doing hate? I don't know exactly even what they said because I wasn't there to hear it. I don't know. I've heard reports. I haven't seen anything in print, but I've heard reports that they were discussing trans issues and the legitimacy of trans issues, but I don't know that for sure. All I know is that this was a group that requested library space, and the library allowed them, these are taxpaying citizens, and the library allowed them to host the space. To use the space to host their event, but said that they don't endorse it. They did not condone or endorse it, and that's the thing. Yeah, libraries do not condone or endorse most of the things that happen in their spaces that are done by outside members of the community or groups within the community. Those things are usually not endorsed by the library. The library simply allows the space use. And this is public facility space that everybody has paid for with their tax dollars. So they were allowed to be there, but there were a lot of people who were saying they shouldn't have been allowed to be there because they were a hate group that made people unsafe. First of all, how do you define hate group? I'm not exactly sure. Hate speech is not defined within the law, within federal law at least, and neither is hate group. There is not a federal law definition for a hate group. Is there one in Washington State? That I don't know. But yeah, their decision to allow the space to be used by Wolf was met with stern condemnation, and people saying, yes, you cannot allow hate groups and people who espouse hate or bigotry to use these facilities. And it became such a big deal that, for one thing, Seattle Public Library hit won Library of the Year back in 2020. So even after this happened, Library Journal still named that Library of the Year, and that opened the wound even more. People were very hurt. People were calling for firing of people within Library Journal and that sort of thing, and people gave back their awards. So this is something that I want you all to see. Hold on, let me pull up the page. All right, it became such a big deal, and it rightfully so. This was something that we needed to talk about as a field, but it became such a big deal that after Library Journal, after they named Seattle Public Library Library of the Year, people protested by giving back their Mover and Shaker awards. So Library Journal, they do Movers and Shakers every single year, where they just name librarians who they call Movers and Shakers. Personally, I think it's just cultist bullshit. It's weird to me. It's just a really weird library popularity contest. And I actually got nominated for Movers and Shakers when I was younger, and actually did not even, whoever nominated me, I thanked them, but even back then I was just like, what kind of cult bullshit is this? Like, I don't know of other professions. Like, my mom's a social worker. They don't have Movers and Shakers within social work where they just, everybody gathers around to celebrate the popular social workers who got some bullshit ass award. Having said that, yeah, this award is, it's cultish and it's weird, but it's also something that people got up here and they were like, okay, we're giving our awards back. A lot of people gave their awards back after Library Journal named Seattle Public Library Library of the Year, after they had this major issue with this, with Wolf and allowing Wolf to use the space. Okay. Now, all of this is good. You see how much people care. You see people are dialed in, as you can see. All these people, where you see these people saying award revoked at request of recipient, all of these people are people who gave their awards back in light of what happened at Seattle Public Library, okay? So Clearly people cared. Clearly people were outraged. Clearly people decided to learn more and more and more about this. And it was dealing with one of the traditionally disenfranchised groups that librarians tend to care about. Now, this is how, frankly, it should be done. I'm not saying, when I say this is how it should be done, I'm not necessarily saying that Seattle Public Library was right or wrong, but what I'm saying is we as a community of professionals, we do have to look out for one another in such a way that when our staffers are feeling threatened and uncomfortable because of a group being in the space, that is something that we have to look at, examine, and see if that's appropriate. And when it came to an issue of transgender people, they were willing to do that. Now let's look at something else that happened with a black person. So again, you probably heard what happened over at Seattle Public Library, or you may have heard, and if you hadn't heard, then Google around, and there's a lot to find out, so Google around and do that, educate yourself. But I bet you have not heard about this, and there are reasons. So this also happened. Alabama Library didn't discriminate by firing black worker who complained about Confederate presentation, appeals court finds. Did anybody get outraged about this? Hell no. And when did it happen? Well, it happened, I believe, in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And actually, I'm wrong. It actually happened in 2017. So even before all of this stuff with Seattle Public Library happened, there was an issue in which, and I will put this link in the announcement, but basically what happened here was this was a black library worker who was also the interim director of the Monroe County Public Library in Alabama, and Mary had been a library employee at that library for 35 years. She was fired after she complained about or took issue with what was going on in the library, where she had to allow a presentation to occur from the Daughters of Confederate Veterans. And the Daughters of Confederate Veterans were there, and they were there with Confederate apparel, and they were there celebrating the Confederate Army. And this I'm not sure about, but Harris even claims that an attendee called her nigger, and that there were at least 70 known Ku Klux Klan affiliates in in attendance. And what I'll say about this is the Confederate flag, the Ku Klux Klan, the Confederate flag. The Ku Klux Klan is very active, very alive and well, my people. I actually come from a town where the Ku Klux Klan is still listed in the phone book. I'll get that number for you, just so you know I'm not BSing. Okay, on second thought, and I live in Missouri now, not in North Carolina, so I'm a bit removed. Apparently I am wrong, but this is new. So I don't see where their number is coming up. Now that is their address. This is where the Clavern is located in Henderson, North Carolina. It's 926 Weldon Road. But you could actually Google them and get their phone number, and now you can't. So maybe they have become unlisted. But the reason I say this is because I've mentioned before to people that that was an element in the story, that there were 70 known Ku Klux Klan affiliates, and that she had become uncomfortable about that. And then people were like, well, how do you even identify a known Ku Klux Klan affiliate? Trust me, they are not all secretive. We have people in Henderson, North Carolina. I'm from Soul City, North Carolina, 20 minutes from Henderson. So the Henderson phone book was my phone book. And yes, we had people in the community in Henderson that we knew were in the Klan. One of them is named Tony Finch, and you can Google him and find out some interesting stuff about him too. Tony Finch, Henderson, North Carolina. But I'm going to say that to say we know who our Klansmen are. Apparently, people in the Midwest and other parts of the country think that all Klans people are people who hide under their robes and you never know who they are. No, when I was an intern at the Perry Memorial Library in Henderson, North Carolina, I actually fulfilled a reference request from Tony Finch, a lead Klansman. He came to me looking for information about North Carolina law, and I helped him find it. So they are not all in the shadows, folks. So yes, there are known Ku Klux Klan affiliates. She became very uncomfortable. You can kind of read through more of this, but basically the issue here is I feel it has a lot of parallels to what happened in Seattle. You had a traditionally disenfranchised group, transgender people, and in this other case, a black woman, library workers, who were made to feel uncomfortable. and who the powers that be said, hey, you have to allow this program to happen because these people are taxpayers and they have rights to use library space so long as they are not violating codes of conduct and harming other library patrons. Okay, so you have those parallels, right? But even in the midst of those parallels, there is an interesting dynamic as to who people care about. Again, you can Google and find a whole lot of information on what happened up in Seattle. You will be very hard pressed to find librarians who, even after, and I did this personally, I sent information about this story out to ALA. I sent it out to BCALA. I sent it out to JCLC, the Joint Caucus of Librarians of Color. I posted it on social media, in spaces on social media that were for librarians, so forth and so on. There was no interest in this whatsoever, except for, yes, Black Caucus did say we should send Mary Harris something to kind of let her know that she's on our radar and we have sympathy for what happened to her. And this is something that, yes, this is controversial for me to say, but I take issue with this. I take issue with the fact that, yes, Black people have been subjected to a lot of obstacles, a lot of pain, a lot of just straight up BS since 1619 in what is now known as the United States of America, without recourse a lot of times and without people caring much unless they could benefit from it themselves. And I feel that that's what you have going on here. The library field cannot claim, oh, well, we just didn't know about the situation in Alabama because people did try to tell y'all and y'all weren't concerned about it. But y'all were so concerned about what happened in Seattle with the group that you do feel is worth your time that, yes, now you're giving back awards and you're trying to get people fired and so forth and so on. But when it came to a Black person in Alabama, who cares? And that's one of the things that really pisses me off about this field and how it operates. They claim to be activists. First of all, you're not an activist if you work for the government, and I'm going to hammer that and hammer that and hammer that. It's stupid to call yourself an activist when you draw a paycheck from the establishment. If you're doing that, please just shut the hell up. But also, you are not an activist if you are deciding that there are people who are worth your time and people who are not when it comes to traditionally disenfranchised groups. So don't get me wrong, you have to have some focus. So yes, there should be groups like Black Caucus that deal specifically with Black issues and groups that deal specifically with Hispanic issues and Asian issues and transgender issues and gay issues and all of the things, disability issues, Jewish issues, all of it. I want all of it to be dealt with. But at the same time, you as a field cannot say, oh, we're a field full of activists, but we're also going to ignore the suffering of our own because, yeah, there's a shiny object in what we see with what goes on with TERFs and what goes on with a controversy related to transgender people. But when it comes to Black people, hey, who cares? It's old hat. That is basically how this field operated through this. And you don't have to take my word for it. Again, just Google and look at what's out there, and you're going to find a bunch of stuff related to what happened in Seattle. You're going to find almost nothing on what happened in Alabama. And you can't let the librarians make the excuse of, but we didn't know about Alabama, because people tried to tell them and they just didn't listen. And so just to draw this to a close, and I know I spoke for a long, long time, just like I said I would, but to draw this just to bring this to a close, for one thing, you have to realize that people have limited bandwidth. So I myself have even been criticized. I put a lot of my eggs in the Black basket, okay? That's what I do. It doesn't mean that I don't care about other issues. However, I do have to say, Black people have a lot of shit that we have to contend with, and so I'm out there trying to do it. And that does mean that I don't have time or the bandwidth or the ability to also step my foot in. I can offer support, but I can't be on the front lines. If I'm on the front lines for Black people, I can't also be on the front lines for everybody else. But there's this expectation that, because I've been criticized for saying this, but I've been criticized by some of these same people who decided they're not going to be aware of the situation that happened in Alabama. And that is what gets me, is that there seems to be a phenomenon in this country to where people in our field, to where people feel entitled to Black advocacy and don't feel that Black people are worth the advocacy. And I hate that shit. All right, I'm done. I'm Dr. Jace, and just when it comes to hate groups, if you're letting hate groups violate your codes of conduct, that is definitely a disgrace. I will see you all next week.